It's a brand new release from Elijah Craig. Let's dive into the Toasted Barrel Rye. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Bourbon Hutch. Thanks so much for joining me on this journey through the world of whiskey. So that's right, today we're diving into a pretty brand new bottle here, Elijah Craig Toasted Barrel Rye. I haven't seen many reviews or too much buzz about it yet. They did announce that they were releasing it a couple weeks ago, and now I was lucky enough to see it pretty early and pick one up. So super excited to dive in kind of fresh and see what my thoughts are, and hopefully give you guys some valuable information as to whether or not this one's worth going out to grab. So Elijah Craig, major brand in bourbon underneath the Heaven Hill umbrella. They've got their bourbon and their rye. They also have the bourbon that's toasted, so they have a toasted barrel bourbon. It's a lot of people's like go-to sweet sipper. I do tend to really enjoy that bottle for around 50 bucks. Now they've released the same kind of variation with their rye whiskey. If you're unfamiliar, the toasting process is basically you take your, whatever the standard product is, you put it into a second barrel that instead of it being charred on the inside, which is literally like set on fire, the barrel's just kind of lightly toasted. And supposedly that does draw out a lot more of the wood characteristics and the wood sugars. At least that's what's supposed to happen. And if you taste the Elijah Craig Toasted Barrel Bourbon, you will notice a lot more sweetness on that one for sure. So we'll see how that affects their rye whiskey. It's particularly interesting because Elijah Craig Rye is a barely legal rye. Stats here are same as their standard rye, which is 51% rye, 35% corn, and 14% malted barley. So that's a lot of corn and barley sweetness mixed in with the rye. And then age, we're not sure, it's not age stated, but I would imagine it's not super young for, Elijah Craig to kind of produce something standard and good. And then proof wise, it's the same as the standard, same as the bourbon even, which is 94 proof. So again, excited to dive in. Price point here is a $55 MSRP. I was able to see my bottle here for $60. So definitely worth picking up for just about $5 over MSRP. Let's dive in and see how good this is and what the toasting experience is like on Elijah Craig's rye. So on the nose, it is woody. A lot of that light wood. So it's not like a deep dark oak, which you wouldn't necessarily expect. It is that toasted, light, woody characteristic. Lots of vanilla tannins because of that. Butterscotch, big butterscotch note coming through. Some baking spices. A little bit of the rye is kind of peeking through because of that. But honestly, mostly I'm getting that like toasted veneer on it. Touch of the rye, slight herbalness. But this is mostly the big butterscotch, vanilla, and toasted wood on the nose. Little bit of a brown sugar, brown butter backbone starting to peek through as well. It's a pretty good nose. It is very sweet. Like that toasted, sugary woodiness is slapping me in the face, and it's very sweet. Inviting for sure, and not necessarily jumping out of the glass a ton, but it's very sweet and draws me in. All right, let's go in on the palate. Cheers. It's very sweet on the palate too. Pancakes. It's the first thing that came to mind. Like a brown butter spread over a pancake. A little bit of honey maybe even. And then all those toasted wood sugars and butterscotch. It's really sweet, but the rye spice is there. The baking spices kind of give it a little bit of a backbone and maybe save it from going too sweet. This is one where just first initial impression diving in is like, it's towing the line on too sweet, too woody, but I don't think it quite crosses it. We'll see if we feel that way after a couple more sips. Let's go in for the second sip. Now that it's on the palate, see if we can pick out some more flavors. Cheers. A lot of the same things there. Very, very sweet. Butterscotch, big vanilla burst on that sip. And the other thing that came in is like a slight nuttiness, but I wouldn't call it a peanut presence, which I tend to get on some Heaven Hill and Elijah Craig products. Much more of like a creamy almond experience. Maybe even like a coconutty, something in that creamy nuttiness direction. And it's nice. It's layered in there nicely. Okay, let's go in for one final sip. We'll think about the finish in particular and just the whiskey overall. Cheers. Okay, so I definitely feel like the pancake note toned down a little bit. It's jumping more into that butterscotch, and now that really creamy almond nuttiness is coming through. I got a little bit more of an herbaceous, grassy thing in that sip, and then a lot of the more baking spice cinnamon experiences as well. But I think the finish is nice. I'd put it at solidly medium. It's very sweet, so that lingers, and then that creamy almond and those baking spices do kind of stick around for a good while. But it's something 94 proof and more designed, I think, to be that pleasant sipper. It's got the kind of finish that makes you want to go back for more. Okay, so quick thoughts. One is, I want to compare this to the Toasted Bourbon and see how they do side by side. So we'll do that in a second, but just staying on the rye for just 1 minute here. Very nice flavors. I think the toasted experience here is about as toasted as you can get for something lower proof and more just, hopefully this is a more standard release. It's pretty toasty, and the wood sugars are definitely being drawn out. The only thing I can note is like it's ultra sweet for me, and the spiciness saves it from going too far in that direction. But I feel like I need to be in the mood to have something very sweet, very desserty, and towing the line on too sweet to really gravitate toward this. So it's always great to have those options around. I think this would be a great first rye for somebody to try because they would feel the sweet notes quite a bit. Speaking of sweet, the bourbon is sweet too. Let's get that out and let's compare. I'll set that up and then we'll jump right to that. All right, everybody, we've pulled out the Toasted Bourbon here to do a little comparison. While we let this have a second just to open up, I do want to say, if you're enjoying all the content coming out of the channel and you haven't subscribed already, would greatly appreciate it if you would hit that button and join us for the rest of 2024 and beyond. While you're at it, please consider hitting the like button on this video. That's what really helps the algorithm get this out to more people. And then also I'd love to hear in the comments below, have you tried the Elijah Craig Toasted Rye yet? If you have, what do you think? And if you haven't, is this one that you're probably going to be hunting or looking for? And does the profile sound like something you'd really enjoy? Okay, let's go in and just compare quickly to the nose on the bourbon. Oh, okay. This has more of the traditional oak and brown sugar bourbon backbone. Bit of a toasted marshmallow kind of experience. Some chocolate. A spice, but it's more of that oak spice than this, which has the more baking spice cinnamon experience. A little darker, for sure. A more dark profile. It's interesting. I always think of s'mores when I think of the Elijah Craig Toasted, and that definitely gives you the it gives you that chocolate, the toasted marshmallow kind of experience. This is like if you took that s'mores and you just really emphasize the graham cracker. I can see that here, and more of a butterscotch experience. It definitely has that toasted wood characteristic in common with its brother here, the bourbon. But the bourbon is definitely the darker on the nose. All right, let's go in on the palate and we'll just compare to the bourbon real quick. Cheers. Yeah. It's very similar, carrying over from the nose. More of the oak, like a darker oak, not just the toasted woodiness, but that's there. It's more of a marshmallow sweetness. And then you get this brown sugar experience. And then that toasted wood is there for sure. This one feels like it's a bourbon, obviously, which it is, and that makes a ton of sense. Has a little more backbone to it. This one, the rye, is a lot more light and airy at times. The oak is more in that light wood direction. The butterscotch versus maybe a caramel and brown sugar here. The brown butter and almond creaminess versus the like darker tones and maybe chocolatey kind of streak in the bourbon. So with the rye, you're getting these lighter, bright expressions, very, very sweet. They're both sweet in their own way, but I'd say the rye is maybe even more sweet than the bourbon. Okay, that kind of gives you hopefully some information to orient yourself. If you like the Elijah Craig Toasted Bourbon and you're a fan of rye, I think this is a no-brainer to pick up the Toasted Rye, especially if you see it for around MSRP. It's very, very easy to sip. If you're not into super, super sweet expressions and you like to have a little bit more of a balance of the bitter, tannic kind of experience along with the sweet, or you're looking for something that has, you know, just tones that down a little bit, this rye might go a little too sweet for you. But it's also a great rye. Both of these are great expressions to introduce people to whiskey, to share with friends and family who maybe don't need something super aggressive. I think the 94 proof point works well there too. And they're both very good for what they're trying to be, which is the toasted layer adds more sweetness and really just ups the ante on how much approachability and just pure sweetness is going to be on the nose and the palate for you. I don't know which one I'd necessarily gravitate toward more. I do really like the bourbon. I'm more of a bourbon guy naturally, but I've been loving ryes recently, and I do just really appreciate how much the almond sweetness and butterscotch experience you get on this. So overall, really pleased with this new addition. I think they pair well as kind of a 1-2 punch. Bourbon and rye, having both in your collection, not a bad thing. I think Elijah Craig did a really good job here. My one caveat, again, is just they almost went too sweet. And I could see this one hitting some palates as probably ultra sweet and maybe like a little turn off because of that. But if you love sweet stuff, this definitely goes after it for you. I think that's gonna do it, everybody. I think that's gonna wrap up the review. Again, would love to hear in the comments if you've tasted this one or if you are hunting it down. Till I see you guys again for another video, all I can say is keep drinking good whiskey and cheers.